All right, the last video here today is about the U.S. Constitution. As mentioned in the Northwest Ordinance video, the first plan for the government was the Articles of Confederation. It didn't work. Government was too weak, could not handle problems that the country was facing. So there was a convention held in Philadelphia. The purpose of it was just to fix the Articles of Confederation. Early on, though, the decision was made at the convention to hold everything in secret, so nothing would get out, maybe influence people's opinions, but also to scrap the Articles of Confederation and write in a completely new constitutional convention, write a completely new constitution. And so that's we'll look at here today is the problems with the Articles and then how the Constitution fixed those problems. All right, one problem under the Articles of Confederation. When you see problem under Articles, just be aware that's discussing the Articles of Confederation, which is a different document in the Constitution. If you have the government right now, you may learn about Article 1, Article 2. Those are just the subheadings of the Constitution. So while the term you see in both the Articles of Confederation is a completely different document, and then each of those in the actual Constitution, they still use that same term, articles, and they have Article 1, which would just be another way of saying Section 1. But in the Articles of Confederation, Congress didn't have enough power. They couldn't raise an army. They couldn't collect taxes. They couldn't regulate trade between states. So these are all problems they faced. And the Constitution then fixed it by specifically giving Congress the power to do those things and others. So Congress today can raise an army. They can collect taxes. They can regulate trade between states. And then also realizing the Constitution was written in 1789. The plan was for the American country to last for a really long time. So Congress was also given the power to make other laws for the general well-being of the citizens, because they can't, maybe decide exactly what issues going to exist in the future. They can't really, pinpoint exactly what the problems will be. But Congress has power to deal with those things. That made the Congress, the legislative branch, much stronger under the new U.S. Constitution. Another problem was that individual states had more power than the federal government under the Articles of Confederation. The state of Massachusetts didn't really have to listen to what the U.S. government said. The state of Virginia didn't really have to listen to what the U.S. government said under the Articles of Confederation. Now it's different. There's a system of federalism was created, which we have a federal form of government where you have the federal or national government. So I think, Washington, D.C., the president, U.S. Congress, the senators, the Supreme Court. But then you also have state government and you have local government. So you have a governor in Ohio, you have the Ohio Supreme Court, you have Ohio Congress, and then you have at the local level, you have a mayor, you have city council members, you have a board of education that are all local to that town. So in each level, they have different things they can do. Education is generally reserved for the state and local governments to make decisions, although there are some federal mandates they must follow. But in general, that's an example of something that has more state power. But when it comes to something like declaring war, Ohio or Tennessee can't declare war in another country. Only the U.S. national government or federal government has that power. And each state, you may not be aware, but each state has a constitution. So there's an Ohio Constitution, there's a Pennsylvania Constitution. But the Supremacy Clause states that the Constitution of the U.S. is the law of the land. So the United States Constitution is more powerful. It supersedes any state constitution, any state law that's made, any local law that's made. A third problem was that there was a fear that the national government would have too much power, which really created that weak government under the Articles of Confederation. But to deal with that, the Constitution made sure to divide power into separate branches of government. The separation of powers was an Enlightenment idea that existed for over 100 years before this document was made. But we have a legislative, an executive, and a judicial branch. Another thing that was added after the fact of the Constitution being written was that the Bill of Rights was also added to protect individual rights, as some people still weren't quite sure if the national government would not be able to overstep their bounds. And click off my picture here so you can see all this. But the debate after the Constitution was written in 1789, before it actually went to effect, there were two basic groups, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And the Anti-Federalists were the people who didn't like the new Constitution. They thought the national government was going to be too powerful now. They were worried it was going to just be a new King of England type situation all over again. And they were very worried the Constitution would not protect citizens' rights, because in the actual U.S. Constitution, before the Bill of Rights was created, it doesn't say you have the right to free speech or freedom of religion. That's not in the Constitution. That'll be added later in the Bill of Rights. So they were worried that those rights wouldn't be protected. The Federalists were the opposite. They liked the Constitution. they believed it provided balance of power. They thought you didn't necessarily have to write down every right that you have protected. They thought just the natural setup of the government created by the Constitution would protect all of your individual liberties. However, that debate dragged on. Some states would not agree to the Constitution as it was currently structured. So there was a promise to add the Bill of Rights, and the first 10 amendments were added to that, which we'll talk about here next week. But when those Bill of Rights were added to the Constitution, then all the states agreed, and the Constitution went into effect.